everyone, welcome inside the 7 Sports Cave. I'm your host, Justin Rose, joined today by a couple of guys that you don't have to pay for to see tonight. You got to pay for them to read them, but it's all worthwhile. The Athletics' very own James Edwards the third. Chris Burke, our Lions insider for the Athletic as well. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for coming in.
We'll work on tips tonight. We can take those.
There we go. Send in
right
your
in.
tips.
Yeah.
We'll take the tips. Honestly, though, if you haven't read their stuff yet, it's absolutely worthwhile. It's like a half of a cup of coffee that you'd pay for a month. You get great insight beyond just the game notes, and I think that's what you guys really excel in. You two specifically, I read your stuff all the time, and it's very, very good stuff. So
We appreciate you.
yeah, that's done. I'm done being nice to you guys now. Well, we got lots to get to on the show tonight, as we do every single week. Got to talk about that Lions disaster. The Pistons, are we buying? Are we selling? Do we love them? Do we hate them? I don't really know. We'll talk college football as well. And, of course, we want you to get involved in the show as well. Anytime, use the hashtag 7SportsCave. I'll get to your tweets later on in the broadcast. All right, gentlemen. Take a deep breath. Everybody at home, do it with me.
I can't breathe, but...
The Lions, again. I know. That's what they do to the fan base. The fan base out there is just... Chris, let's start with you. Man, you have a team that seems to be ascending, and then today happens, and you're like, what was that?
We mentioned it. This is what they do, right? And we talked about, like, the whole thing was this is the culture change. And, you know, Matt Patricia's changing things. It felt different last week in Miami. Played, the physical style football, ran the ball on the road, won that game, and then come back home and sort of back to the old ways. And they really, I mean, this wasn't one you pin on the refs. This wasn't one you had one bad break go against you. I mean, there were a couple here and there, but they just got dominated. They got manhandled all afternoon.
I mean, when you're watching this, James, today, from the perspective that you're watching it as, did you expect something different? And then it was like the rug got pulled out? Because that's how I felt. I felt like I was ready to see a domination up front, a will to move the football on the ground, play action, and do the things that, and we didn't see any of that.
For me, I'm probably not the person to ask, because I told myself, I think at a very young age, more so than some Lions fans, that I'm just not going to get invested
not
in
gonna
it.
go there.
So I just have been through a lot as a 26-year-old Lions fan, and I can't even imagine what anybody older than me has been through. So you expect the unexpected. You really just do. And you wake up on Sundays, you hope for the best, but you wish for the worst, and it's usually the worst that's been happening around these parts when it comes to that football.
Especially at home, too.
Yeah.
What is their problem?
Two worst performances are at home, too. The Jets game was an abomination. And then this week, again, this is a good Seattle team. I think it's better than they probably looked so far. Russell Wilson, we saw, he's one of the best quarterbacks in football, and they've got a run game now to go with him. So they're going to win some football games, but yeah, I mean, the Lions came out, they get a stop, they score, it's 7-0. You're thinking, all right, here they go again. This is just continuation. And then that Amir Abdullah fumble happened. And you don't want to pin it just on him because, again, I think it was a total team loss. But that happened, the Seahawks scored, took the lead, and the Lions never really recovered. And again, that's kind of the old Lions, the one thing goes against you and it all sort of falls apart, and they didn't really get it back till the fourth quarter.
Was it fair to say, and I had said this very publicly, that I thought this was a winnable game. I thought they should win this game. Looking at what Seattle was, they didn't really necessarily wow me in any particular area, but then for them to come out as flat as they did, ugh.
I think it was a winnable game.
I like Russell Wilson. I respect him. The Seattle team on paper is not a great team, but they play hard. They do what they're supposed to do, and it's a game the Lions should win. When you look at paper, when you stack them up against each other, it just doesn't happen sometimes.
It looked like they got dominated up front, and after the game, both Matt Patricia and Matthew Stafford both talked about controlling the game and how this game never really felt like the Lions had much say about being in control. They did 10 more minutes, the ball in Seattle's hands throughout the entire game. Yeah, they had a little bit more Lions love in the fourth quarter, but that's just atypical, or that's just typical to the Lions. Wait till the fourth quarter to show up. When you look back at this, what do you really take away from this one?
I mean, I think you're right. I think Damon Harrison, we saw some glimpses of what he's going to be in the middle. Their run defense was way better when he was out there. He had the great pass rush for the sack in the second half there. So you can kind of see what that's going to be a little further down the road. But when he wasn't in the game, Seattle did whatever it wanted up front. And I think you saw how much attention they have to pay to the run. You had everyone sort of flow in one direction, and they hit them with a bunch of those play actions going back the other way. And then the same thing on offense. I think it was up front again. You know, Kerryon Johnson, whatever, 8 carries, 9 carries, so they got away from the run entirely when it wasn't working. And again, this was stuff that Miami, the run defense wasn't great, but it was okay, and the run game dominated for them offensively. And now, you know, you're kind of back to wondering what exactly this team is.
It looks like a team that doesn't have, like, the focus. And Ricky Jean-Francois, after the game, very adamant about his team moving forward. Take a listen to this.
We wasn't focused at all. We wasn't focused on offense, nor defense, nor special teams. We just wasn't focused, and it showed in every phase of this game today. We wasn't focused, but it's just crazy how we can beat top-tier teams and play them up and down the field as soon as we play a team like this. I don't know what it is, and I really don't care what it is. I just want everybody to just lock back in. Lock in for these next, what, 10 weeks, 11 weeks? Help me out here. All right, 10 weeks, just lock in. Like, leave everything else alone outside this building. I know you love your family, but tell them you'll see them in February. Just lock in and do your job.
And Chris, you were right there in the scrum. I mean, break this down for us.
Yeah, well, I mean, the one thing you can count on after the game is Francois to be pretty open. And, you know, he'll get right to the heart of what's going on. And I think it's tough because you listen to that and you wonder who he's talking to. You know, that's not just something he's saying off the cuff, not just something he is thinking for the first time in that moment. That sounds like it's been kind of snowballing for him, where maybe the approach hasn't been exactly where he thinks it needs to be day in and day out. And I think that will be the message all week for the Lions, not just from him and from Matt Patricia, but for everyone. That's really what they have to get back to, because next week they go to Minnesota and you lose that game, and suddenly I don't know that you're pulling the season back from that. So they have to fix this, have to get that focus, as he says, and figure out if they can get back on the right track.
James, it looked like the focus even went to 50-50 plays, not just the defensive backs getting basically beat on the first 3 touchdowns. I mean, it was right. They were in position, they just didn't make a play.
Right.
But it came down to the front on the defensive side and the offensive side getting kind of bullied around. I mean, Seattle's rush offense looked great today.
Right. No, we were talking about it before we got on air. This team has been doing, there's been numerous transactions from draft time till up to last week, and it seems like it's a team that's trying to transition into something else on the fly. And you see glimpses of a team that's not quite sure what they are, and then you see glimpses of a team that has the potential to be something good. I think with most coaches in most instances in any sport, that first year you don't know really what to expect, but I think they're trying to at least lay the foundation now and figure out what they are and what they need to address as they go into year 2 when things get, there's really no more excuses. It's kind of time to play ball. But you see just you see sporadic play, and it's, I mean, it's synonymous with the Lions, but it's just a team that's very much trying to figure out where it is in this new direction.
You mentioned those close touchdowns. I mean, the first 3 touchdowns, Lions guys were right there. Tease Tabor had the tip, and, you know, the guy juggled it, made the grab. And I think that kind of speaks to just how razor thin the margin for error is for this team. One of those plays goes the other way. You know, they recover the Abdullah fumble. A couple of those things go their way, and they probably win that game, or at least it's right down to the wire. Right. But you can't afford to have 4 or 5 things go the other way when it's sort of those make or break plays. And, you know, when they have gotten those breaks, when they forced those breaks and made those plays, they're winning ball games. And when they're not, this is what happens. They're not a great team by any means. So, you know, you've got to have some of those big plays, and Seattle really made all of them for the second and third quarter.
Sure.
All right, let's play a game of buy or sell with the Lions here. Do you buy this team as a legitimate playoff team at this point of the season, and why?
I'll get mine out of the answer. No, I do not. I think next year, I think we're going to see the leap everyone hoped to see this year. I think it's going to come next year. I just think right now they're just trying to figure out too many things. There's too many things going wrong, and like Chris said, you seem to win the little things battle, or the battles of differences, when you have a team that knows what it is, when you have guys in place that have been around for a while, when you just have some type of team backbone. And it just seems like this team just doesn't have that right now. For good reason, too. They're trying to figure it out. The
only 2 reasons I would buy still are because, A, I think the offense is way better than what they showed on Sunday. And we've seen the offense at its best, especially, I mean, last week in Miami was as good as that offense can be.
Maybe I've seen in my life.
Yeah, so
that was a really good.
So, you know, you can get hot with that offense, you would think, over 4, 5, 6 weeks. So I would say that's one reason. The other reason is that I don't know that the NFC is that good. The division's pretty tough, but I think that those wild card spots are going to be pretty wide open. But again, I mean, I think now you made at Minnesota, at Chicago, you probably need, I mean, you absolutely have to win at least one and maybe both those games to really have any hope, and that's a pretty tough order.
So was that a buy or a sell?
I will.
That's a long way to talk to get
I'll reluctantly sell. I mean, I think
Tough.
I think they could convince me to come back, but I'll sell for now.
One more for you. Buy or sell. Matthew Stafford, one of the players that maybe needs to focus a little bit more on the things. I only bring this up because it's been uncharacteristic of some of the turnovers he's had this season. Not all of them are his fault, but some of them, particularly today, crunch time, fumble and interception.
I'm going to sell that one. I mean, I have a hard time pinning too much of this on Stafford, and you're right. The turnovers, the fumble in midfield, the interception was terrible. Yeah. I mean, that's a play you've got to see on the goal line there, and they were still in that game at that point. So it's the same thing as back in week 1, just really mistakes we haven't seen from him in the past. And so, you know, I don't know that there's necessarily anything off the field that's causing those, so I'd hate to throw him under the bus.
That's fair. That's fair.
I mean, I think they still go really as far as he can carry them. And again, he's got to be better than he was Sunday, but he's also been really good in spots this year, so I'm going to sell that one.
Last one I have for you. Will the Lions win in Minnesota next week? Because you guys aren't going to be on the show next Sunday, so I got to get your take on it now. Do you think that because this is what we've seen. Right. So now we're down here, and we got to come back up here. I mean, this is typical to the Lions that they go on the road and beat a team that they shouldn't.
And they won in Minnesota last year. I don't think that they do this year. I mean, if you're asking me a week out if they win there, I don't think they do. I mean, I think that Minnesota team is still the best team in the NFC North. I think that defense is still really, really good. And you know, that game the Lions won last year was 14-7. Mm-hmm. They're not winning 14-7 on the road this year, I don't think, with what we've seen from this defense. So that's going to be tough to pull off.
Again, I'm with him. It's tough to, especially a week out, just to predict that the Lions are going to go into Minnesota and win. I'm fond of Minnesota. I like the defense. I think Kirk is the right quarterback for that team. I don't see it happening. I wouldn't be surprised if it happened, because I'm not surprised, as I said before, with anything this team does, but I just don't anticipate it happening.
All right, perfect. What do you guys think? Do you think the Lions are going to be able to turn it around in, 6 short days here to get ready to go into Minnesota to get a victory next week? We'll talk about that later on in the show. Those tweets need to have the hashtag 7SportsCave. I'll get to those. But coming up next, how about some Detroit basketball? James has been following it intently. He knows the ups, the downs, the ins, the outs of Boston's just massacre on the other. But it's a good season so far. We'll get to that coming up here next. Stay with us on the 7.